I love it when that happens. So I am so excited today to be here with Mrs. Debrena Jackson Gandy. And Debrena, you know you're one of my favorite people, right?
Thank you.
So Debrena is a master life coach. She has written 3 books that are national bestsellers. She hosts a program called Juicy Woman University, which I happen to be part of, taking my 3rd year under her wonderful, amazing tutelage. And one of the topics we've talked about that's really important to success is just this idea of integrity. So today, Debrena and I are going to talk a little bit more about integrity, using integrity to achieve anything you want in life, right? It's a foundational core to being successful. And as you guys know, my theme this year is achieving your best, most successful, and most powerful year yet. Debrena, tell us a little bit about integrity and why it's so important.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me back again. I always love being involved with your great programs and the Bigger Than Me movement. And it's great having you as one of the cohort members in Juicy Woman University. And as you know, it is not just a 7 ways, 8 steps kind of program. It is a 12-month life transformation program. Yes. When you talk about transformation, you're not just talking about progress and improvement. You're talking about going beneath the surface, beyond behaviors, and even deeper than thoughts to beliefs and belief systems, which, as we know, those are what run our lives, not us. And one of the cornerstones of a powerful life, a successful life, one built on rock and not sand, that has sustainability, resilience, and longevity, is this notion of integrity. And in the course and in my teachings, I define it as your ability to keep your word. You say so, you do so. And there's 3 levels of integrity. There's integrity with self, which is the trickiest, because when you make a commitment to yourself and say, I'm going to do this and such, no one else is usually aware of it but you. So the easiest level to breach or break integrity is with self, whether it's resolutions, whether it's daily actions where we say we shall do or will do something. The second level of integrity is interpersonal, where now there's another self that you are making an agreement with, saying, I shall do, I will do, saying so, and declaring it shall be because of your involvement or participation, keeping your word to another self. But then the highest level of integrity is keeping your word in a group, whether it's a team, whether you're leading a company, whether you are over a project team. Leadership is that 3rd level of integrity. And it is like the foundation of a house. And a significant amount of time is taken on laying a foundation of a house or a building, because the entire structure depends on the integrity of the foundation. Same thing in our lives, same thing in our businesses, same thing in our professional lives. And so many of us have holes, cracks, fissures in our foundation, integrity being one of them. And yet we keep trying to build and wonder why it isn't taking, it isn't sticking, it keeps crumbling. I can't get traction. I'm having to effort too much. So integrity is a cornerstone principle of a powerful life, powerful leadership, and a successful, sustained business.
I love that. I love that. And so the reason I wanted to bring this topic back to this audience is because there's so many things that we are saying we want to do in 2022. The question is, what are you going to do in 2022? We have an opportunity to up-level everything. And if we're up-leveling our personal lives, that means we really have to take a lot more seriously things that we say we're going to do. Success is really all about accountability. And so when I became a certified success coach, it was like I had to check myself. I was like, I do some things extraordinarily well and other things I've kind of let go. So when I think about, we have something called a success wheel. It has 5 key elements, 10 topics, but it relates to business and relationships and, you know, your environment and things like, you know, we all know that we can be successful in one area, perhaps your business, but not be where you want to be as relates to maybe your wellness or a relationship, for example. And so really deciding that you want to have a higher level of integrity in all aspects of your life is what this conversation is about.
Yes.
Now, when Debrena said it's integrity to yourself and integrity to others, we're going to talk about that as well. So the first question I want to ask you, Debrena, is really talk a little bit about this idea of how we rationalize our way. Like we make these little deviations. Well, I said A and B and C, and now we're at A, B, D, and V. And you're like, but that's not what we said. Like I do it all the time. Like when it comes to my workout, well, I didn't do this, but I, you know, modified and, you know, I'm going to do it later, or I'm going to do something else. And it's like when let's talk a little bit about the importance of being clear and sticking to what you say. And then if you're going to try to make an adjustment, pause, realize that you didn't do what you said, get a new agreement in place, whether that's with yourself or someone else. Let's talk about these adjustments, this flexibility.
Well, I call it cleaning it up, because what happens is your spirit is there every moment of your life. Other people may not be there, but your own spirit is there with you every moment of your living life. And so when you are in violation of your own word to self, another, or a group or team or in leadership, your spirit is aware of it. But we have to understand that we are made a very specific way. In this year of 2022, the repercussions for living against and in opposition to that way we're made is now rising to the surface, and we see breakdown and implosions and disintegration everywhere, including mentally and spiritually. So we got cleanup to do because our spirit has recorded it all. So how do you clean it up? So if you have a bucket, let's say, and you keep trying to do more and you have all these goals, which is like pouring more stuff into the bucket, but the bucket has holes. So just to make more plans and pour more stuff into the bucket is futile until you repair and fill the holes. So if you gave a word to another, for example, and you flaked, you didn't show up, you didn't come through, then one, you got to clean it up because their movements were in accord with what you said. If someone says, hey, let's meet at 3, confirm it, they're there at 3, they've adjusted their energy, time, life, and choices to fulfilling that agreement. So if you flake, you don't show up, then you got to clean it up. Then let's say it's 2:30 and you see, oh, that agreement, I'm not gonna be able to keep it. Well, then you communicate before you break it. I find that with women afterwards, oh, this came up and we're used to that being acceptable. This came up, sorry, I couldn't be there. Oh, this came up, I wasn't able to make it afterwards.
Right.
So we haven't been taught the basics of integrity and how to clean it up. I would say to people, don't make any new plans for a month. Go back and see all of the breaches of integrity you need to clean up with yourself, where you need to acknowledge it and say, I release that agreement now. I'm not gonna, it's not important to me anymore, or make a new one, or others. Make out your list and go down and clean it up. Hey, you know, 3 weeks ago, 2 years ago, fill the holes. So that's real. And we can continue to try to set new goals and new plans, but we're going to look behind us and the water is leaking out of the bucket and we're going to be working way too hard. And then because life is reflective, if you have out of integrities you haven't cleaned up and addressed, then you will find that others will deal with you and not operate in integrity. Isn't that the craziest thing? It's actually fascinating. So this is foundational, and we can try to, you know, leapfrog over it and circumvent, but we now are being called on the spiritual carpet in 2022 that our ignorance of something is no excuse for being affected by. And so we are seeing the wave go out. It's been going out. Now the wave has come in and it's slapping us upside the head because of our violations of so many spiritual principles and how we've been living personally, as a culture, as a country, globally. So that would be the first thing, is clean up your out of integrities with self, with another, or if you have a group or a church, for example, that is a group. There are pastors that need to go back and clean up
I
some
love
stuff
it.
with their congregations.
I love it.
And it's not been done.
I love that so much. And one of the things we were just talking about earlier is, again, how you do one thing is not necessarily how you do everything. So we know how to be in integrity. We often do it better for others than we do for ourselves.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, if you think about, you wrote a book, one of your books is called Sacred Self-Care Principles.
Sacred Pampering Principles.
Sacred Pampering Principles. On the wall, I see your other book, Love Lies, and then All the Joy You Can Stand. So guys, go out and get all these books. They are foundational to life. But you wrote the Sacred Pampering Principles over 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, 97. Can you believe it?
And it's everything is even more applicable today than then. So we have people I met people that were like, oh my God, Debrena, I read your book 20 years ago, and that's so great to meet you now, because this is how I am. This is who I am. This is how I live. And I think putting yourself first, deciding that I'm going to invest in ourselves. I just did a presentation.
I didn't say put yourself first. I teach put yourself back into the center of your own life. I don't talk about hierarchy. Talk a little first and others are second.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Clarity.
No, talk a little bit more about that. Being in the center is not the same as being on the top.
Right. There's a lot of memes in social media right now, particularly being put forth by women about put yourself first. And that's dangerous. Because one, you can get a demotion if you're first to second, third, or fourth, or marginal, or not at all in your own consideration. And so it's not about a hierarchy, it's about understanding the order of things. And so your life is like a mini universe, and you're to be in the center of it, like the sun is in the center of the solar system, or the nucleus is in the center of the atom. It is a principle of life. So when you find yourself instead of the sun in your own solar system, which affects everything orbiting around it, and you find yourself out at the Pluto location in your own life, then you're going to be resentful. Your body's going to start to break down. You're going to create codependent relationships, enabling and all kinds of very unhealthy patterns. So my message to women is put yourself back into the center of your life, where each of us should be. And then you live outward from a place of sacred self-care, which there's dimensions and definitions and a belief system to go with that. So it's not about first. And that's often when we say that as women, it is a reaction to putting ourselves last. So the answer is not swing to the other extreme, because then that also is a posture out of imbalance. So we keep reacting and swinging the other way with the pendulum instead of coming into truth and what really, really, really works. Put yourself back in the center and recognizing how you're using your energy, who's orbiting around you, family, friends, business associates, colleagues, friends. And then you can do an evaluation, because the rays of the sun reach all the way to the edges of the solar system. So when you shift, it shifts your life universe. So you don't have to be first. Put yourself back in the center. That is the most powerful space, because there's no hierarchy.
I love it. Yes, yes, and yes. Y'all see why I love so much about Debrena?
Whenever people, I got it when I'm being interviewed and people make comments that I've never said or I've never taught. I just thought, that might be your opinion, but that's not what I teach. Just want to make it clear.
I'm always like, let's pause and get some clarity. So I love that about it. Well, thank you.
And it works. It's a win-win-win. That's the thing.
Yes.
It's a win-win-win. And when you've been self-last, self-least, self not at all, self on the margins, and then you swing to the other extreme out of reaction, not being healed, and now you're self first, that's a win-lose. But if you put yourself back into the center, it's a win-win-win. And we're used to a win-lose, because when you're last, everyone else is winning and you feel like you're losing. Well, then when you're first and everyone else is secondary, now you're winning and other people are losing. So we keep swinging to these binary frameworks. And no, put yourself back in the center, and it's a win for everybody.
Yes, yes, and yes. Yes, thank you. Yes,
Yes.
I love that. So you see, what you just did was a point of integrity too, right? This concept of clarity and integrity are
Yes.
actually perfectly aligned, right? You
Yeah.
can't really have one without the other, right? You want to make sure you're clear about agreements, clear
Yes.
about what you say you want to do, clear about what you're trying to accomplish. So one of the topics we also discussed is this idea of integrity as it relates to business, right? And so, you know, one of my passions is this idea of inclusion. And one of the things that drives me is when I've worked in corporations that are heart full of wanting to do the right thing. However, when the lived experience is not aligned, part of the work that I do now is to help organizations to actually align what they say with what they do, to actually ensure that what they declare is going to be their intention is actually the lived experience. And the real work is what happens when it's not aligned. And so I have something called the transformational inclusive leadership with mind, heart, and soul. It's a process. It is a process for becoming in alignment. It's a process for building integrity. It's a process for cleaning it up. Because when you just mentioned, like, things have happened, clearly you're not getting the results that you want, because no one is. The numbers are clear. But how do we now align what we say with what we do, which means how do we create that inclusive culture? So tell me a little bit, Debrena, about this idea of organizational or leadership integrity.
Yeah.
So, and the importance of trust and what happens when that's broken. Like, all that's kind of connected to me.
Well, I'll start with the first part where you talked about integrity and the relationship to inclusion. And what I see is that there is a critical element that isn't being talked about enough, two critical elements that are not being talked about enough in that space. It's yes, say so, do so. We said, here's our initiative, and then walk it out, carry it out, operationalize it and all that. But what I see is missing is the will. Because when the will is there, then choices are congruent with the will. And then the results are congruent with the will. So there's conversation, there's statements, but I see the will is missing because the results demonstrate that will is missing. So if it keeps being about, hey, we're trying, we're really working on it, the will isn't there. When the will is there, it happens. Now, then there's the deeper question. Well, why is the will not there? What's that really about? Then you have some beliefs. Beliefs operate like truths, even if they're false, delusional, warped. Nonetheless, they dictate our thoughts and then our behaviors. So unless you have gone through some kind of major detox process, having grown up in America, then you are operating from some very specific kind of beliefs that operate in contradiction to efforts to be inclusive and to value the contributions of especially Brown and Black people as one form of diversity. So that's not being discussed, because then you got to go into beliefs, then you got to go into healing. And we think, oh, that's messy in America because we are all about materialism. But here we are in a collapsing country in terms of the paradigms and the tenets on which we have built it.
Yes.
Falling away, expired long ago, but propped up with toothpicks, bubble gum, and control of media. So the will has not been there. And that comes from, and I learned a powerful lesson when I was chair of the board at Highline College. We rotated that every year. And it's the longest standing, oldest community college in King County. And since its inception, because it's now 50, 60 years old, I think, they have had older white males as the CEO. Now, nothing's wrong with that. But on the same hand, the college proclaimed that they're the most diverse higher ed institution in the state 2 or 4 year. Now, let's contrast the makeup of the student body, most diverse, yet the C-suite, we have incongruence. So I kept hearing, brown and black people in the education system, talk about the bottleneck and why don't we have more brown and black leaders, because we have the intelligence, the genius, the capability. So I just asked a few questions, a few basic questions when I was chair, just a few. I'm not even in the higher ed community. I'm not in the education community. I'm private sector. And with just a few questions of a few people, I could clearly see what the barriers were. And I said, I'm removing them because I had the power. And it didn't cost any money. It was up here and here, here and here. And
the
made
heart,
a couple
people.
shifts, had a rich pool of talent. Instead of we have to go by who applies, we'll change the process of how we promote and do outreach. Very simple, not a big deal.
Right, I love it.
And so then we gave some instructions to the consultant we were working with that were different than how he usually does presidential searches. We did some relational stuff to let people in the system know we're serious at Highline. It's not just lip service. That meant a lot to them. Oh, they look like they really mean it. They're not just saying it. And now, under my leadership as chair, after 50, 60 years of the organization, of this college being in existence, we have our first Black president. Now, that's after 50 years of history. Higher ed, two different institutions, long-standing higher ed. But because the will was there, and I know I had the authority as chair of the board, but if I didn't have the will, it wouldn't matter that I had the authority, you see? So I was able to see what could happen when the will's there, and then you adjust everything to the supposed outcome you claim you want. So that's why it's not sticking. That's why it's not taking. That's why all of these consultants being paid for DEI, because the will isn't there. And it's not rocket science.
Right. And I think thank you for that. I think you said something else. You also talked about just this idea of, this level of accountability, right? I mean, you have the power to change. And oftentimes we have people that are in these new D&I roles that they're added, to maybe work they were doing, or somehow they're now responsible for D&I, but they don't have the power to actually change the status quo. And that's kind of part of why we're bringing people together in community, because as leaders, we get to decide what success looks like, right? We get to create a space where people are able to see success in a different way and truly drive change. And so I
was on a board though. So boards work as a hand. They don't work as a finger. So I still had to make a case. I still had to use influence so that they would see it the way I saw it. We need to change the process. Here's how. I had to build agreement around that. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it wasn't like I was some monarch chair.
For sure.
So whatever the scenarios are, because there's different levels of power, influence. But I'm just saying that is an ingredient that, to me, as someone not immersed in that world of DEI, that I see is missing.
Right.
And it's like a cake mix without the eggs. Like, okay, well, let's stop trying to bake until we put the eggs in, because the cake is going to flop. And so that's just my observation and my experience creating a legacy difference in a long-standing institution, and how it came about, what the steps were, the change in the job description, all those things based on the feedback. I only had to speak to 5 people. Oh, why haven't these changes been made already? This is not. will and asking, what are the blockages, and then removing them. Done.
I
Yeah.
love that. I love that so
I do
much.
too.
I love it so much. So when we think about integrity, and we got leaders who are saying, hey, I'm now responsible for D&I, I'm responsible. And I think everyone's responsible for it, right? If you're part of an organization, like we like to promote the idea that it is about inclusion, but allies are a critical part of that. Whether you're the leader, the follower, we're all part of the solution. And so when you're trying to collectively hold each other accountable, there really does need to be some idea of love. I say lead with love, because oftentimes there's energy, right, that doesn't preclude itself to really people working together. You just mentioned the idea of influence. In order to influence others, I think it's important to lead with love. I think it's important to make sure people understand your intentions. And we're going to end. I know you're short on time, so let's end on this idea of the importance of I'm just going to say leading with love, the importance of ensuring that there's purity in the intention, so that we can all move forward together. It's a journey, right? Not a
right. And integrity is, if we have a diversity initiative or a DEI initiative, and then we have some goals, then that means there have to be plans and a strategy for the goals to be fulfilled. If we are saying and stating that we're committed to this in our organization, and we're clear about the compelling business reasons, because in business, you want to have everything tied to your growth and your health of the organization, and the well-being of your employees. So integrity looks like, we said so, here's our diversity statement, here's our goals, and that means you execute. You give people the authority, the freedom, the support to just make it real. And what we often find is there's subtle interference, overt interference, contradiction, saying it and then undermining and sabotaging, creating barriers and hindrances. And we have stories and stories, don't we, about those scenarios. So integrity is needed for, in the cornerstones of DEI work at the personal level, like you already were talking about, and then from our leaders, because as the head, so goes the body. And so if the head isn't operating in integrity and doesn't have the will, then the body follows behind the head.
I love that. I love that. There's more that you and I are going to be able to talk about. Is there any final words you would want to share with individuals who think they're in integrity, but they find that the results are not aligning to what they want?
Yeah. So if we have, let me just share with you some of the signs. If you're feeling tired, depleted, frustrated, find yourself complaining a lot, or efforting lots of energy and not the commensurate results for all the energy and activity, those are signs that, hold up, I got some holes in the fabric of my personal power. I have some breaches of integrity. Let me go back and start at level 1 with self. What do I need to clean up? What do I need to acknowledge? And then sometimes forgiveness work is involved. That's a process, 5 steps to it. It's a process. It is a spiritual technology. It's not just write a letter or go to the altar or confess something. It's a whole recipe.
Yeah.
And then we need to take a look at our integrity with others, often family members, loved ones, spouse, partners. Those are where the children, those are where some of the most insidious breaches have happened that we need to go back and clean up. Yes. And so that would be where I would have people start, because then as you work the muscle in your personal life, your personal universe, then as you show up in bigger spaces and you're able to affect and influence more people, then that power of integrity ripples outward, and you're also able to operate and keep your word in those spaces. But there's a sequence to it. So that's where I would have people start. It's cleanup time. 2020 and 2021 were cleanup time. We didn't do our cleanup, and now all the gunk, funk, and junk is splattering all over our lives. But cleanup is still needed. So that's where I would have people start.
I love it. I love it. So y'all heard it here. There's some opportunity for us to do some cleanup, but really it's important also to think about just understanding the fact that integrity is key to everything that you do. If you want to live your best, most successful and most powerful year yet, we're basically saying check in on this concept of integrity. Check yourself. And there's an internal barometer. You know when you're not in integrity. We've kind of tuned it out a little bit, but I'm going to say tune back into this concept and put it at the forefront of what you know is most important. You're nodding your head, Debrena. You like that?
Yes, it reminds me of the Monopoly game, right? Do not pass go, do not collect. Integrity is like that square, like get that handled, because nothing else is going to work if you try to keep circling the board.
There you go. Get it handled. Thank you, Debrena. We'll talk again soon. Have a good one. Mwah. We love you.
Love you.
Oh, wait. Debrena, how can people find you? Your website is
$1milliondollarmentor.net.
yes.
Also, I have a private Facebook group called The Sacred Society with Debrena. A lot of the teachings and principles for people who are just getting acquainted with me. At the Debrena on IG, on Twitter. So it's easy to get in contact.
It's easy. And so let's go back to this Facebook, this Sacred Society, because I was just so excited about that. Like I was just blown away. We're going to share that with people.
Did I say what my website address was?
You said the $1 Million Mentor.
Not me, but $1milliondollarmentor.net. Okay, just want to check. Go ahead.
Yeah, so $1milliondollarmentor.net. Tell a little bit more about the Sacred Society. How do they find that? What is it exactly called?
Yes. So just go to Facebook and put in The Sacred Society with Debrena, and it should come right up at the very top of the search. But it's a excuse me, a free but private membership group that I started because people that weren't able to register for programs, because my programs are very cohort based, they're like, I have friends I want to refer. I want to keep my iron sharp when I'm not in one of your programs. So the Sacred Society is a place where it's an exchange of wisdom and some of the insights and principles of what I call the Juicy Woman lifestyle, a different paradigm for living and being that undergirds life, love, business, self-concept, everything. So that's where people can start to get acquainted, and I do exclusive broadcasts there. My next one will be March 3rd, so folks can request to get in. I'm talking about love relationships. So yes, that would be a great like first door to enter to get more acquainted with me and be in more of these kinds of conversations. The Sacred Society with Debrena, private Facebook group.
Y'all, I don't miss time with Debrena. Anytime I can get, I'm in. So I look forward to seeing you in the Sacred Society, part of Juicy Woman. When that comes back through, there's all kind of Love Academy. There's all kind of, plus people can find you as a private coach and consultant. All of that, they reach you through
$1milliondollarmentor.net. Grand Central for Debrena. Yes.
Yes. So thank you, Debrena. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
We love you. Bye.